Number 1.
A German murder victim has been found alive and well in Dusseldorf more than 30 years after her disappearance. Petra Pazsitka's 1984 disappearance triggered a massive police search when the then 24-year-old student in Braunschweig was reported missing after failing to show up at her brother's birthday. Investigators sought help from a popular crime show in 1985, Aktensichen XY, and police said they were acting on the assumption of a murder crime, according to a recent statement. A suspect in the rape and murder of a 14-year-old girl from the same area confessed to Pazsitka's murder, but a body was never found, according to Joachim Grande, a spokesman for the police in Braunschweig. The cold case was officially closed in 1989, but heated up again 2 weeks ago, when police in the western German city of Dusseldorf were called to reports of a burglary. The woman who reported the burglary initially identified herself as MRS Schneider, but when asked for identification confessed that she was Pazsitka, according to Dusseldorf police spokesman André Hartwich. Pazsitka, now 55, told police she had been living without any official documents under a false name in several German cities for the past 3 decades, Grande said. She did not even have a bank account and paid all her bills cash, Grande said, adding that Pazsitka appeared to have been making a small income through illicit work. According to Grande, Pazsitka would not elaborate on why she was living under a false name or why she disappeared in the first place, saying only that the woman had said family issues were not behind her disappearance. Her father passed away a few years ago, but her brother and mother were in shock and tears when they heard the news, the police spokesman said. However, Grande said Pazsitka has stated she does not want contact with her family or the public. Pazsitka's family has asked police to deliver a letter to her in hopes of one day reuniting, he added.
Number 2.
For 30 years, Edgar Latulip was gone. He didn't remember his own name or realize he was living 80 miles from home, where he was listed as a missing person, and where there were competing theories about how and where he had most likely died. No one had seen him since September 1986 when, according to news accounts, Latulip disappeared from a Canadian group home, got on a bus bound for the south side of Lake Ontario, and forgot almost everything. He assumed a new identity. He settled in a new city. He built a new life. But a recent recollection has led Latulip back to the world he left behind. Police this week announced that Latulip, 50, had been found in St. Catharines, Ontario, not far from where he had vanished decades earlier. And most shockingly, it was Latulip who solved his own cold case. Authorities had once said Latulip was developmentally delayed and had mental health challenges. His mother had said her adult son, who was 21 when he disappeared, functioned at the level of a child. The last time his mother saw him, Latulip was in the hospital, recovering from a suicide attempt, according to the Waterloo Region Record. Latulip abandoned the home in Kitchener and, police said, headed for Niagara Falls, a common suicide site, the Region Record noted. In an especially troubling sign, he had left the residence without his medication. Soon after, police said, Latulip suffered a head injury and lost his memory. But police said he started having flashbacks last month and remembered his real name, Edgar Latulip. He told a social worker, who discovered that he was a missing person, and contacted local authorities. After a voluntary DNA exam, police were able to confirm his identity. The Missing Children's Network called it incredible news. Edgar's recovery is the reason why we never give up hope, said Pina Archimone, the organization's Director General. Phil Gavin, spokesman for Niagara Regional Police Service, said Latulip is now preparing to reunite with his family. It's a pretty huge thing to find out you're someone else, Gavin told the Washington Post, so I think he's taking it slow. In 1986, Latulip was a 21-year-old man with a 12-year-old's mind, according to local news reports and missing persons listings from that time. He was staying in a group home near Kitchener and living at least partly on a disability pension, according to a 2014 series in the Waterloo Region Record. It was a Tuesday that September when he skipped town. His mother, identified by local news media as either Sylvia or Sylvia Wilson, told the Region Record that she feared her son had been killed and buried. This is always at the back of my mind, Wilson told the newspaper in 2014. Having an answer would mean closure. When Edgar disappeared, I became quite sick. I had to take a leave of absence from work. I was near a nervous breakdown. Latulip's missing persons poster showed a young man with wire-framed glasses and a toothy grin, a computerized image to show people what he might look like. It said he had a thin build, a scar above one eyebrow, and troubling mental issues. For years, investigators tried to find him, pushing paper and going door to door and, later on, republicizing his cold case, along with several others, in hopes of solving the decades-long mysteries. Sergeant Richard Dorling, a homicide detective with Waterloo Regional Police, which oversaw the initial investigation in Latulip's disappearance, began encouraging local media and members of the community to spread the word. Pass the information on, Dorling told the Region Record in 2014. If you see a poster, a picture, or an article posted on Facebook, send it out on Twitter. I'm hoping somewhere out there, someone will remember something. Authorities followed a lead in 1993 to nearby Hamilton after someone reported seeing Latulip there, but they never found him, according to the Waterloo Region Record. At some point, he settled in St. Catharines. Police would not comment this week on Latulip's life before his disappearance or the accident that caused him to forget it. It's also unclear what kind of life he built for himself after vanishing, whether he had a job, a home, or a family. Authorities also would not reveal his assumed name. But they did acknowledge that Latulip started working with the Niagara Regional Police Service last month to find out his true identity. Gavin, the police spokesman, said investigators took a DNA sample from Latulip and contacted Waterloo Regional Police Service, which helped them compare it to a sample taken from a family member. Authorities recently learned it was a match. Dwayne Gingerich, a Waterloo Regional Police detective on the case, said he was elated. I had hopes that he was out there somewhere, he told the Waterloo Region Record. For us as investigators, this is great, this is awesome. It's satisfying because most of these cases don't turn out this way. You expect the worst when a person is missing for that period of time. Then, police phoned Latulip's mother, who now lives in Ottawa. She was excited, happy, overjoyed, Gavin, the Niagara Regional Police spokesman, told the Post. After 30 years of not knowing where her son is, knowing that he's alive, she's pretty excited about that. Alana Holtum, a Waterloo Regional Police Service spokeswoman, told the Post that she had spoken with Latulip's mother Wednesday and learned that the mother and son were working on a plan to reunite. She said that obviously this has been a worry to her for a long time, Holtum said.
Number 3.
Richard Hoagland and Linda Eisler were living a comfortable life with their 2 children in Indianapolis. Linda was Hoagland's second wife, marrying her after divorcing his first wife. His huge and steady income afforded them a big house, had several cars, and they used to go on exotic vacations, which is the reason his departure was such a shock to the family. For more than a decade, the Indiana woman had assumed Richard Hoagland, who had mysteriously vanished after 11 years of marriage, was dead. That all changed this summer when Eisler received a phone from Detective Anthony Cardillo of the Pasco County Sheriff's Department in Florida, according to ABC News. He asked me if I knew who Richard Hoagland was, and I said, yes, that's my ex-husband, Eisler said. He said, we have him in custody. After abandoning his family in 1993, Hoagland moved to Florida, where he constructed an entirely new existence from scratch. Police say he started by stealing the death certificate and adopting the identity of a man named Terry Jude Szymanski, a fisherman who died in 1991. News about Hoagland's arrest broke in July, but his ex-wife and the investigator, who uncovered his true identity, have recently spoken out on ABC's 2020. Using the death certificate, he applies for a birth certificate, Cardillo told the ABC show. He uses the birth certificate to get a driver's license. Once he has the driver's license, he starts establishing his name as Terry Szymanski. For more than 2 decades, Terry Szymanski appeared to lead an ordinary life in Pasco County. He had a wife named Mary and a teenage son, owned property and worked odd jobs, according to the Tampa Bay Times. She said there was always questions, but he would always come up with a reason or an explanation, Cardillo told 2020. The truth began to surface when a nephew of the real Terry Szymanski, who drowned in 1991 at the age of 33, started an Ancestry.com family search, according to NBC affiliate WFLA. Knowing that his uncle was dead, the nephew was surprised to find someone with the same name living in Central Florida. He looks up his real uncle Terry Szymanski and realizes that he died in 1991, which the family knew, Pasco County Sheriff Chris Nacco told the station. He then starts scrolling down the page and sees more details that Terry Szymanski was remarried in 1995. He owns property in Pasco County, Florida. Fearing that their fake relative might try to harm them, family members waited 3 years before eventually contacting authorities in April, police told the Tampa Bay Times. Hoagland, 63, was arrested in July and charged with fraudulent use of personal identification, the paper reported. He has pleaded not guilty to the charges, ABC reported. Hoagland's disappearance in 1993 seemed to come without warning, Isler told 2020. She said the family lived in a large home, took exotic vacations, and appeared to have a healthy marriage. Their 2 sons were ages 6 and 9 at the time. Then, one day, without warning, everything changed. He called me at work and told me that he was ill, and that he needed to go to the emergency room, Isler told 2020. And I said, well, why don't you just wait, and I'll go with you? He said, no, I don't have time to wait. Isler was never able to find her husband, even after calling all the local hospitals. His toothbrush was still there, she told 2020. He didn't pack any clothes. It was cold. It was in February. He didn't take a coat. In his absence, Hoagland's family suffered, never knowing what had become of him. In addition to losing their house and cars, Isler said there was even a point when police suspected she may have been criminally responsible for her husband's disappearance. She told investigators that Hoagland told her in the early 1990s that he was wanted by the FBI for embezzling millions of dollars and had no choice but to leave town, according to the Tampa Bay Times. In reality, police told the paper, Hoagland told investigators that he left Indiana to get away from his wife. Eventually, the paper reported, Hoagland's wife assumed her husband was dead. They interrogated me over and over and over, she told 2020. They alluded a lot to the possibility that he was involved in some type of drug trafficking, which I had no clue. He devastated us, she added. He left us with nothing, absolutely nothing. I was very broken. Jerry Bayer, a law professor at Texas Tech University who studies identity theft, told the Tampa Bay Times that Hoagland's alleged actions are unusual because most identity thieves steal people's names to commit crimes. He told the paper that because the real Szymanski never married or had children made him a perfect candidate for identity theft. Yet, he noted, Hoagland's ability to maintain the lie for more than 2 decades was shocking. It was a lie that was probably made easier, Bayer said, because it began before digital records were commonplace. You just never know, Bayer told the paper. It will all catch up with you. Cardillo said Hoagland's new family in Florida was also shocked to learn that its loved one had a former identity. Obviously their 20 years of marriage was shattered, Cardillo said. The sun came down. He was shocked. It was still his father. It's his blood, but that Szymanski name is not his. The emotions they were feeling were between anger and sadness and the wonder of why. Asked why Hoagland left his life behind, Cardillo told 2020 that Hoagland's explanation was strangely simple, family issues with his wife and children, he said.
Number 4.
Gabriel Nagy doesn't remember when Princess Diana died, Operation Desert Storm, or the end of the Cold War. That's because for 23 years, most of his life was a blank. But now, the man who lost himself, his family and his memories has been given them back, thanks to the dogged determination of a police officer who solved a decades-long mystery. Mr. Nagy's extraordinary story told to the Courier Mail to give hope to the families of missing persons began on January 21, 1987. On January 21, 1987, Mr. Gabriel Nagy called his wife at home and told her he would be coming home for lunch, but this conversation was the last she would share with him for 23 years. Nagy, a father of two, an 11-year-old son and a 9-year-old daughter, didn't come home that night, and he was the kind of person who always told someone whether he was coming home or not. The following day, people found his car burnt out at the side of the road, and this was a sign something wasn't right. He'd never been away from home without telling anyone, Jennifer said. It was very soon after that everyone started rallying around and started putting out the big alarm bells. About 2 weeks later, Mr. Nagy withdrew money from his bank account and used it to buy camping supplies at a store in Newcastle. It would be their last clue as to his movements. It was just so traumatic for everyone, Jennifer said. It really affected me emotionally. People would ask, "Where's your dad?" It was too much, too painful. Nobody had any answers to explain the sudden disappearance of a dad who was a loving, caring father. I thought he was my world, and all of a sudden it's taken away from me. Soon they relocated from their Sydney home to Queensland's Sunshine Coast. Pamela made sure they were always in the phone book in case her husband ever found his way home. But soon they became convinced he was dead. But more than 20 years later and just 2 weeks before an inquest would have declared him dead, Senior Constable Georgia Robinson found something. As part of her preparations for the approaching coroner's court hearing, Const Robinson, who had been searching for the former Sydney man for 10 years, did a final sweep and found a Medicare record in the name of Gabriel Nagy. "I'd been living under a pseudonym for a long time, but I'd been having flashes of my proper name. Things were slowly returning," Mr. Nagy said. Life had been tough for the former shop fitter and accountancy student. He'd once had a job, a comfortable home, and a family he loved, but he remembered none of that. One of his earliest memories is of his time in Newcastle, where he remembers bleeding profusely from a head wound. Scarring on the back of his head is a constant reminder of the injury he believes caused his amnesia. The next 20 years are mostly blank, but Mr. Nagy recalls being offered shelter and work on a farm in Rockhampton, as well as odd jobs on fishing boats and building sites around Queensland. He slept rough on the streets, camped on the beach, and hit the bottle to dull the pain of his nothing life. And then in Mackay, he met Pastor Barry Hayhoe, a truck driver turned church man, who saw something in Mr. Nagy that was worth saving. He offered him a room at the River of Life Church and the job of caretaker. "I jumped at the chance and it kept me off the streets," Mr. Nagy said. It was the pastor who helped him get a Medicare card in his original name when Mr. Nagy needed cataract surgery. That record was spotted by Const Robinson, who picked up the phone and dialed his number. "She said she wanted to come up and talk with me," he said. "There was something in the back of my head, there that I must have done something wrong, to have been living the way I was. But the first thing she said when she arrived was, 'You haven't killed anybody, you're not wanted by police, you're a missing person, and that's not a crime.' She asked me a lot of questions and started showing me photographs. It was like a cartoon where flashbulbs go off on top of people's heads. She gave me a letter from Jennifer, a letter from Pam, and letters from my dad and stepmom." Const Robinson told Mr. Nagy the ball was in his court as to whether he wanted to contact his family, who by then had been told he was alive and well. "That afternoon I sat down and wrote the longest letter I'd ever written in my life, 7.5 pages on both sides of the paper," he said. He posted the letter to his wife and daughter, and 3 days later a message from his daughter came through, on an old mobile phone he'd been given. "It said, 'Hi Dad,' and that was enough to make me cry," an emotional Mr. Nagy said. She wrote that she'd finished the letter, and she still loved me. 10 minutes later the phone rang, and it was Pam. We talked until the battery died. 2 weeks later Jennifer, then 32, flew to Mackay to see the father she had only known as a little girl. "He met me at the airport with a big bunch of flowers," she said. "It was like it was all in slow motion, and we ran through the airport into each other's arms." Mr. Nagy has remained in Mackay, but keeps in constant contact with his parents, his wife, and their now adult children. Jennifer said she wanted to tell her story to show others what it means to a family to have answers when someone disappears. She believes her father developed a condition called dissociative fugue, a rare psychiatric disorder that causes memory loss, and often leads to people wandering away from their families. "I want to give people hope that sometimes good things can happen, miracles can happen," she said. "If you have left home, for whatever reason, ring and let somebody know you are okay. It doesn't have to be your family. The not knowing can really affect you in the end."
Number 5.
A Spanish doctor, declared legally dead in 2010, has been found living in a tent deep in the forest of Tuscany by 2 Italian mushroom pickers. Carlos Sanchez Ortiz de Salazar, now 47, disappeared from his home in Seville province in 1996, during a bout of severe depression. After nothing was seen or heard of the man originally from Bilbao for 14 years, he was legally declared dead by the Spanish authorities. But 2 weeks ago, a man claiming to be Carlos was found by 2 mushroom pickers, who stumbled across his camp on a thickly wooded hillside outside Scalino, a town in Tuscany. The 2 foragers had been eager to find some mushrooms in the woods after a weekend of heavy rainfall, but after having no luck, the pair decided to venture off the footpath to try and turn their fortunes around. But instead of finding mushrooms, they found a trail of plastic bottles and dirty plastic water canisters which they followed, until they stumbled across the camp of the man, who reportedly had a dirty face and large beard. Terrified, the 2 men ran back towards the footpath, but returned a few hours later with the head forest ranger. After reaching the camp, the man came out to greet them. "I'm Spanish, my name is Carlos, and I've been living here since 1997, he said. "I don't want to live among people. Now that you have found me, I need to get out of here." But before Carlos packed up his camp, the group asked him to prove his story, at which the hermit pulled out a battered, faded and long-expired passport bearing the name Carlos Sanchez Ortiz de Salazar. Before leaving, the group managed to snap a photo of his passport with their smartphones. Using the photos, the foragers were able to notify the authorities about the man's presence in the woods, as well as the Missing Persons Association, Penelope, in Italy, and its counterpart, Estado Desaparecidos, in Spain. The authorities quickly tracked down his family, who arrived in Italy on Friday. "That's him, that's our Carlos," sobbed his parents when they saw the photo of his passport. "He is alive, and that is the most important thing," they told journalists from Corriere della Sera. On Saturday morning, his parents joined a search party that went into the forest where the mushroom pickers had found Salazar, but he had done as promised and moved his camp. "There was no sign of him," said the disappointed mayor of Scarlino, Marcello Stella. "Who knows if we will find him again?" But his parents were resolute and vowed to continue searching the forest until they could find their son, who they had believed dead for so long. "We respect his will and his freedom, but we're not leaving until we have held him in our arms again, even if it is just for one last time," his mother Amelia said. It is not known how he managed to survive in the wood for so long. Some theories suggest he found a way to cultivate food, while others suggest he has survived thanks to midnight raids on dustbins at the edge of nearby towns such as Scarlino.